for Teardown. Today we have this piece of medical technology from a company called ConMed VP1500. This is the VP1500, and it's called a digital documentation system. Essentially what it is a recorder, and that's it. It's an entire PC with a DVD drive and video input. There you go. I mean, I don't know how much this costs, but because of all the medical regulations and stuff, I'm sure it was a lot of money for what is essentially just a plain motherboard with video input. I mean, it's a very nicely built, as we'll see, but I'm sure it cost a fortune. It has video inputs on the back, and you would record it, and it has a special software that records patient information. And I was able to get into the software and fiddle around with it. There were actually some videos and images of, like intestines and stuff like that, or that were on the drive already. Unfortunately, the drive is dying, and I can't boot the system anymore. It's just head crashing. So I did manage to get a little bit of captured video before it completely died. But essentially what this would do is just record video and log it with a patient file. And on the front we've got this big clunking power switch that lights up, DVD burner, I think it's parallel ATA, and that's it on the front. On the back, you can't really tell, but this is actually like 2 feet long. This thing's a very long case. It's not too wide though. It's quite compact actually if you don't take into account the huge depth. Anyway, we've got audio in and out, VGA output, which is the computer that this is, and we've also got some serial ports that are covered up. We've got RGB, which is a VGA signal, in and out, S-video in and out, and we've got some, I think these are just contact closures, so you can have like a foot switch to do a still photo and a record. Ethernet port, I think it's 100 base T, 2 USB ports. I believe this is actually a buzzer. It's kind of hard to tell. I haven't really heard it beep, so I don't know. Small fan. This looks like it's a 60mm or something. And IEC power with a fuse, and we've got a big grounding lug. And that is pretty much it on the back. It's got their lovely patent sticker. This is actually a sticker that they put on specifically. It's like they made this and then, oh look, we got the patents. Okay, we better put that on. So I slid off the top case, and it's very heavy duty steel, so is everything on the inside. This whole system is very heavy. We've got a power supply, hard drive, the DVD drive, funky motherboard. There's actually a back plane here that we'll get into. I haven't even taken it out, so I don't know how over the top it is, but it looks fairly convoluted. There's a secondary power supply board. This looks like it's just like distribution and maybe a couple voltage regulators on the side of the case, and I've noticed that there's this weird, almost cotton-like dust everywhere. It's strange. It's all through the case. I mean, I'm fairly certain it's just dust, but it looks like polyester fill on cheap pillows or something. It's very unusual. It's probably just a result of being in a hospital, because it's probably so clean in there that that's all you get. Just lint from lab coats and stuff. But I just thought it was kind of interesting because it was everywhere in this case. Although it's a little difficult to get the screws out because of it. There's this really nice RFI gasket along the whole edge of the case, but they put the screws below it, so you have to pry down the gasket, and it gets all sticky and stuff. It's kind of annoying. I found all its medical certification and stuff at the bottom. Also, it's Windows XP Professional OEM version product key. Don't steal that. I'm going to need it. Anyway, if I recall, it was actually running Windows 2000, so it's possible they overwrote it. I don't know why, but I'm fairly certain it was running 2000. Unless they just had the theme set to the classic theme. I can't really remember, but I know it definitely didn't have the generic XP look. I've stripped the case to pretty much nothing now, and behind the front panel there is actually space for a floppy drive or a zip drive, something along those lines. This is the cutout for the power switch. The whole front of the case is just like the rest of it, really heavy duty steel. Like, I cannot bend this. Very different from, say, a cheap like Corsair case. So I've got everything out of the case now. It's just an empty shell, and now we can take a look at the individual parts. This is the IEC power connector. It just was bolted on. It's interesting because it's fused, and it's obviously for a medical device. And you see that all the lines run out through this cable out to the switch. Okay, so the mains power goes through here to the switch and comes back to here. This goes into the power supply. And I don't know, that seems a little odd to me. Wouldn't an well, not like an isolated device, but a medical device, don't you think it would need to have the two lines completely separate in case one of the, like it melts the wiring, it would bypass the switch? It just seemed a little weird. I guess maybe because they're both individually covered, that maybe it's allowed, but I just thought that was a little weird that it's allowed to travel in the same heat shrink when this is supposedly being in place to cut the power. But you know, it's got a fuse, so I guess it's okay. And there's also the ground wire that goes to the chassis, and it also goes to the power supply. It was nicely bolted down and everything. It's an interesting IEC connector with its the ground line just goes to a solder tab, but the fused connection actually goes through a metal plate, an exposed metal plate. This is all live. You gotta keep in mind this is just the pin. So this is all live, and it goes in to the fuse box and then comes out into one of these other spade terminals. So that seems scary. And even on this side, like, that's heat shrunk, but this is all open. And this isn't that old. This is 2004, I believe. So that seems a little scary to me. I don't think you're allowed to have that much exposed metal on a power connector. I was about to just chuck this away, and then I realized, man, this is the most awesome design ever for a fuse holder. So, I mean, at least I haven't seen one before. I don't open these up too often, so, you know, there is a chance this is a common design. But so I popped this out. I was like, okay, I'll save the fuse, because it's always a good idea to have spare fuses. So it comes out with this edge connecting plastic holder thing, and if you hold this up, you can pop out the cartridge style holder for the two fuses. That is just beautiful. Love it. And yeah, that explains why it's all the flat bars on this side, because the edge connector just kind of wedges into the metal. Beautiful. Really, really nicely done. And I like the fact that you can use different size fuses in it. They made this side a long piece of metal, so if you have like a standard length glass fuse, it'll fit as well. Moving right along, we have the DVD burner, which is just kind of a standard DVD burner. I believe this is a Pioneer. Yeah, Pioneer. And it's the DVR111D. I think I actually have one of these somewhere. And it's just a standard parallel ATA DVD burner. And it was mounted in this frame that was attached with Loctite, even though nothing else had Loctite on it. So why did they put Loctite on two screws? There's the hard drive, which, as I said, is dying/dead. It is a 7200 RPM Hitachi Desk Star, made in November 2006. So I guess it's newer than I thought. I thought it was 2004 because I looked at the fan. But yeah, 164 gig, nothing special, and obviously useless. I even put a little red dot on it so I'd remember that it's broken when I try and sell it. And speaking of the fan, this is a Mechatronics 12 volt fan. Never ever seen Mechatronics products before, made in Indonesia. And yeah, it's just a 2-wire job, nothing too interesting except for the fact it is a very large motor. See how little fan blade there is? And it was held in place with these really nice long screws with a nice metal anti-finger poking deal. And yeah, so I'll just get rid of that one. Not a Noctua. Power supply is made up of essentially two parts, which is the standard switch mode power supply, which looks familiar, although it's in this nice acrylic case. Actually looks very nice. I really like the design of this case. Well, you know, it's just a shroud, really, but yeah, it's a very, very nice looking power supply on the surface. I swear, every time I press record, a helicopter or something flies over the apartment. Anyway, this distribution board has a couple, I think they're just linear regulators, some nice test points, and some Molex connectors. This one says IF cable, which is actually just a connector that runs off to the back panel board, which we'll get to in a minute. And there's a bunch of them just labeled device 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one just goes off to the power for the DVD drive. And that's pretty much it on this thing. There's not too much on it. Oh, and there's also this extra cable that runs to the motherboard to supply power for it. Much like the power supply, the hard drive, and the back panel, and this thing, everything's got these nice little standoffs on it that keep it away from the metal case. Hard to see with the heatsink shadow, but this is a positive voltage regulator, and this is a negative voltage regulator. And yeah, they're just adjustable ones. I don't know what they're running them at. They're probably getting a negative 5-volt rail for the memory or something. Not really sure on that, and I can't be bothered to hook all this back up to find out. It says Camtronics Sir Power on it. I haven't seen Camtronics written anywhere else. It's not on the motherboard or on the power supply. At least I haven't seen it on the motherboard. It is possible it's there. So this is the power supply. It's a GLM75A made by Condor Power Supplies, which I've never heard of. And like I kind of mentioned before, it's, you know, it's just a bare board, and it's got just this acrylic shroud on it with its lovely, you know, guy dying horribly high voltage warning. The power supply just bolts onto the side of the case, and the fan sits about here. Like, it's not forming like a channel on it or anything. It's just kind of in the area. So this is basically just convection cooled. I mean, like, the layout of it with it like this means that the hot air is just going to rise and have to come out here. It's not even open on the top properly. I mean, there's gaps around it, but it's not like fully open. And at first I was like, you know, this is really nice. Like, it's got proper, you know, everything's fused. There's lots of mauves, and you know, it just looks really, really nice. And you know, they're using nice Nippon Chemicon caps everywhere. Proper parts. Those look like LT parts in there, I think. And it's just really compact, beefy power supply, because the 5-volt rail is 8 amps. Plus we got some other stuff, so yeah, it's fairly just, I mean, it's rated for 3.1 amps at 100 volts, so you know, around 300 watts, give or take, minus the efficiency and whatnot. So it probably works out to like 200 and something. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know, this is really nice. But then the more I thought about it, I don't know what they were really thinking with some of this stuff. Now, I haven't run this thing too much, so I don't know how hot this thing actually gets. I mean, I've run it, but I just haven't checked it out to see how hot it was getting. And, like, we've got all these caps. Okay, remember, this is up. We've got all these caps here surrounded by a heatsink. And yeah, you could get some airflow going up here and out here. But it just, like, when you got a fan over here, why wouldn't you design this in a way that the fan can blow over the power supply? It just seems very bizarre, and it's the same situation here. This is, it can let air in here and kind of waft up and come out, but there's still a heat sink around here, a huge filter cap here. So I don't really know what the general idea behind this design was. And you know, they didn't hot glue any of this stuff down. I mean, there's the resistors that can like wobble around have been hot glued, but none of the caps have been hot glued. There's a couple pots scattered around for tweaking the voltage. I mean, other than the weird cooling aspects, it's like a nice little power supply. I mean, like, if it weren't for the fact that I used a weird ass connector, you could do something with this, but you know, you'd obviously need a bottom for it. I wouldn't recommend having that open. But it looks nice, at least with its lovely acrylic. I'm just not convinced on its cooling properties. I looked this up, and I did find it on Mouser, and it's actually only 75 watts. I don't know how it's... I guess maybe that's just its maximum potential rating, but 3.1 amps seems like a lot for something at 100 volts. So, you know, that just could be the inrush current for the filter cap. But yeah, it's listed as an open frame obsolete switching power supply. 75 watts. It's 4 output ranging from 5.1 to 12 volts. And it's, of course, medical grade. Like I said before, it's a nice power supply. I'm just not convinced on its heat dissipation. Then again, because it is only 75 watts, it's possible that there's so much over-engineering put into this thing that this doesn't even get warm. That would be my guess, because, you know, it's a fairly big power supply for only 75 watts. So I would say that the reason why this thing even works is because it's not putting out that much heat. And it's just all convection cooling is just fine because it's just overbuilt. Because, yeah, this is fairly heavy. Oh, according to the internet, it's 1.2 pounds. And, you know, the heat sinks are very big. So, yeah, that could explain why it's just an odd design in terms of cooling. Finally, we get to the motherboard. It just had this big, heavy metal back plate on it, which is, like everything else in the case, ridiculously strong. And, sorry about the squeaks. It squeaks on my anti-static mat. So this is a riser card. And one thing I haven't figured out, because I haven't really looked at it in too much detail, is how it's getting the S-video in. I don't know where that's going. The motherboard doesn't seem to have it, so I don't know where it's going. And most of the connections to this board just run along wires, so let's try and get this apart. Okay, it's connected. Oh, okay, I see. It's a special connector. I thought it was a parallel port connector at the bottom, but it's not, as we shall soon see. So this connector carries 2 audio mini plug connections over it to the audio in and out. And we've got this high density, well, not super high density connector, but a pin header style connector with the nice clamps running to, I think it's just taking all the serial and the, oh no, not the serial, it's taking all the VGA signals. And we've got this ribbon cable which is running to a larger pin header. We'll have to look and see what that's for. Not sure yet. And an Ethernet cable. And this is USB. You can tell just by the fact that it's black, white, red, and green in 2 pairs for the 2 connections. So this is the back panel board. You can see they didn't break off the paneling completely when they took that apart. But yeah, we've got a little, it is actually a little buzzer and all the connectors. It's a very nice board. It's very high density. They have quite a bit of analog stuff here. Oh, there's relays too. What are the relays doing? Bizarre. Now, I was trying to figure out why this board even existed. I wasn't sure if it was a safety requirement. Like, I figured this motherboard had all the ports that we needed. It's just that they didn't bring it out to the back of the case, and maybe they needed fuses and, you know, whatnot. So for the medical certification, but it looks like this is like a whole control board with. It's got 6 relays. It's got a fuse, and a little pin header or a little pin socket. Oh, it's beautiful. Look at that. Beautiful. It's got a whole bunch of botches on it. This thing is just littered with resistors. And what exactly am I looking at here? We've got a vertical resistor twisted together and soldered to a diode going into both vias. Wow. Yeah, that's a new one. There's also these resistors going to these Max 392s, which are analog switches. And it's going between a via and a pin. This one's doing the same thing, and this one is between two vias because it's not going to the chip. And there's these nice caps. Oh, WEMA. Very nice caps. These are probably film caps. And we've got some tantalums strewn about. Yeah, nice little board. It's just got a pass through for the Ethernet with this little RFI gasket thing here. Let me move my light so it's not quite as harsh. I've been using, I'm going to plug it so I don't blind the camera. I've been using this supposedly 30 watt garden light. It's actually 20 watt to do my later videos, and it seems to be working quite well. Since I don't need my monitor here anymore, I just hooked it up to my monitor wall mount, and it's working quite well. I just have it like the standard one with just a plug on it, and it puts out a whole bunch of light. The only problem is it's a little harsh, so I'm trying to get it where it's not, see the big blob, I'm trying to get it so it's like just like a nice cool white everywhere, but it's kind of hard to do on circuit boards, which are always bright, or sorry, reflective I should say. They tend to reflect a lot of light when you're trying to film them. So I'm trying to take this Ethernet pass through out, and it doesn't seem to want to go. Oh well. Yeah, like I said, this is an interesting board. It does there's tons of passives on it, like, and obviously we have the active Max 392s and stuff. So this is obviously sending data from this big 3-row connector, DB connector. I forgot how many pins these are, but yeah, this is obviously taking the, it's got like the S video and stuff, sending it to the motherboard, but it's also doing I/O for all these relays and stuff. And yeah, the USB looks like it's separate. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any interface to the USB. I mean, it's kind of a giveaway when it was only 2 sets going to the connectors, but yeah, so they're obviously running the buzzer and all that stuff. It's just funny how they have this massive connector, yet so many things have to be plugged into this board. So on the other side of the board, we've got even more stuff sticking out of it. This is where the USB and Ethernet plugged into. There's a fan, just a 40mm cheap-ass fan, I think. FM, made in China. This might be the source of most of the noise in this case. We've got the big parallel ATA connectors running off to the drives, and the first thing you kind of notice about this motherboard, why are there connectors on this end and on this end? Well, this board is made by Matrox, and it appears to be just like a product they sell. It's called the Foresight 2, and it's just a product they'd sell, and you'd build your own case around it, and it's essentially a PC with video capabilities and obviously the ability to drive relays and all that sort of stuff. We've got some PC100 memory installed. Don't see a size. If I recall, when I was using the computer, one thing said 512, another thing said it was only 256. So I'm not quite sure how much memory that is. Not that I really use PC100 anymore. We've got 2 VGA connectors running to the front, which we saw earlier with that big connector. So it's like, we're making this custom cable to just run it from one side to the other. And another thing, oh, interesting, they're only running some of the lines to this one, because I noticed that the wire was way thinner. Looking down at this board, I think these are 2.5-inch ID headers, like for internal laptop drives. They've got an adapter, and then they've just attached a metal plate onto the top to hold this in. That is really, that's bad. That looks just terrible. Like even the metal's like warped because it's like it doesn't even line up properly. That's pretty bad. Pretty bad. And there's a daughter card on here, and this appears to be all part of the same system from Matrox. So we'll take a look at the boards in detail once I can get these guys out. And I think what I'll do is I'll take off all the heat sinks, since I'm not going to keep this board because of its custom nature. Disconnected all the cables, got all the heat sinks off. Just retained a little imprint of Intel in the glue, including the CPU heatsink. Got all that stuff off. Now we can see the board. Now the board is labeled Foresight 2 EBX from Matrox, and it has an older Celeron. I think this is a Pentium 2 based Celeron, possibly a Pentium 3. It's got a huge heat spreader on it, so I'm not 100% sure. It's a 1.2 gigahertz 256K cache, 100 megahertz system bus. We've got the Intel chipset and VIA chipset. I don't know what. One's probably Northbridge, one's Southbridge or some nonsense. Intel Ethernet controller. Got a Matrox G450 graphics chip and some memory for it. There's a DVI connector on the board. Didn't know that was there. It's not used in this particular design. 3 FireWire ports, none of which are used. It'd be nice if they ran the FireWire out. You could get FireWire recording. I don't know why they wouldn't do that. Maybe for power safety reasons, because FireWire can put out like something crazy like 50 watts. So maybe they don't want to risk any sparks or anything. We've got the high density connector and the serial and the audio, and this nice 4-high green LED stack. That's kind of cool. I might take that. So we've got like what appears to either be custom, like an EEPROM for the little CPLD or FPGA that's here, or most likely just the system BIOS. And we've got a whole bunch of other random stuff, including these giant connectors running to the, where is it? The Foresight acquisition module. And from what I've read, this is actually what provides this video input. There's analog devices parts, probably an analog to digital converter. And we've got a little Xilinx Spartan, which is probably gluing everything together or just processing the raw data. This board has a bunch of bodges on it. See them all over the board, including a very crooked 10 ohm capacitor. But yeah, it's just these big bare pin headers. Like, look how easy that is to bend. Like, can you imagine installing these all day? How worried you'd be that you'd bend them. Anyway, yeah. So this apparently can take another board on top of it. We got like either a CPLD or something, or maybe another EEPROM. Probably programming header, or maybe just an alternate board, because there's a bunch of unpopulated stuff on this board, so it probably make different modules for different types of analog inputs. The funny thing is, they still actually manufacture boards like this. They actually have newer ones with USB 3 that are, as far as I know, still current. And I found the data sheet for this, and it's got an example case. It's a very small case, and obviously it's designed to have a front and back set of ports, so that's why this is like the front that goes to the big camera connector, and all this stuff is at the back going to your monitors and your keyboard control. So they do market it as like a PC-based video capture system that you just buy outright, and there you go. It's for medical imaging, machine vision, and yeah, like, it's a nice board. It's just underpowered, and it's a weird shape. I originally bought this thing, I mean, not just to see what was in it, because it was pretty cool looking, but I purchased it because I wanted to see how good it could record. Like, I figured for medical imaging, like with the S-video inputs, it probably had a really nice analog to digital converter, and it's just like the whole thing is probably like really top quality. And from the videos I've seen, it is actually quite good, like the ones that were on the hard drive. The problem was it runs an operating system, and it's like a separate computer, and it's huge and it's heavy, and it's just like, yeah, I got a FireWire interface and it seems to work just fine. So that is how I record my VHS tapes, and this thing has never been used, partially because I couldn't get it to record anything. The software would let me enter new patient information, but it wouldn't actually let me do anything. Like, it wouldn't let me record. It would basically just let me shut down. I couldn't even quit the software properly. It wouldn't show up in Task Manager, and even in the list of process or process viewer in Windows. Like, I couldn't even find it. I didn't even know what the program name, because they're all DOS names. So yeah, I kind of gave up on that, because besides, like, you know, I don't want to use the medical viewer stuff. One, it probably doesn't capture audio, and two, why? You know, I'd want to use like real video editing software to capture it, but who knows what language this speaks, or if there's drivers for, like, a universal driver for anything that can accept video input. So I just didn't want the hassle of any of that stuff. So unfortunately, it's just an interesting teardown. I mean, the board itself is quite cool, and by the way, you can tell this is medical grade and really expensive. It's actually made in Canada. If I recall correctly, Matrox is a Canadian company, as was ATI before they turned into AMD. This board is probably only like 6 layers, and it's pretty densely packed. I mean, you can see all the FireWire controllers and stuff on the bottom. Like, there's a whole bunch of active devices on the bottom, let alone all the stuff on the top. So yeah, it's probably a pretty pricey product when you buy straight from Matrox, and you know, when you add in the fact that you have to design this thing and get your special add-on card, which is probably like another like $300 or some nonsense. This was probably a pretty expensive device. Just has some Molex style power connectors. What?